ago. I'm a visual artist, curator, and cultural worker. And I've also had my coffee this morning, so I'm quite awake. I hope you have too. I want to thank you for being here today. You could be outside painting landscapes or socially distancing while shopping right now, but you've chosen to be here, which really means that you're very serious about your art. And as an artist, I really appreciate that. This is the third year in a row that I've presented this workshop on networking. And first of all, I have to say that I graduated from Concordia University back in 1862. 2007. And back then, nothing like Artch existed. So when I left school, I was really kind of on my own. I didn't really know many of the students at that time because at that time I was actually already a professional artist. And there wasn't anything like Artch that kind of created a structure for exhibiting artworks, a structure for training, and also for connecting other like-minded artists. And so for me, it's a wonderful pleasure and a great honor to participate in this wonderful initiative. I have sat on the jury on the first year in 2018, and this is my third year presenting. In my experience with networking workshops, I've been in quite a few of them, maybe a dozen or so, and most of them are rather short and very much centered on the concept. What is networking? This is how you're supposed to sell yourself. This is how you're supposed to make the connection. And one of the things that I always found that these workshops were missing was really real life experiences that I could relate to. I'm sure a lot of you are students at Concordia University or have been students. When I was at Concordia, we took classes on writing artist statements, bios, and even networking. But it always seemed like an afterthought or something that networking existed on another planet. And so the purpose of this networking today is really to kind of give you guys some tips and also some advice based on real life experiences that I've had as a professional artist, curator, and cultural worker. So I hope this is useful for you. I'm going to share my screen right now so you can see what our itinerary is. So without further ado, this is our itinerary for the day. And it's broken up really into three different parts. So the first part for this morning, part one, my journey thus far, history of networking in the arts and lessons learned. We'll start with a quote with the late, great Dexter Gordon, who's a jazz tenor saxophonist. During this presentation, I will use some quotes to kind of give an idea of some of the ideas that I'm trying to communicate. And in this, I'm sure you share the same, often share the same kind of feeling about how being an artist, you feel kind of a little bit different or a little bit like an outsider. And so the late, great Dexter Gordon said, anyone that's an artist has always been, to my knowledge, has always been looked on as some sort of oddball, out of the mainstream, which of course you are. Okay, so we're going to begin with the source. A lot of my networking when I was younger was really kind of based on the idea of kind of sealing the deal and reaching an objective. But I found as I've gained experience that really a lot of what I do is based, or it's built on the foundation of who I am and my identity. And these are some of the things that have been the spring or the points of departure for my work. So arrivals and departures. In my life, I've moved around a lot. This is my family back in Malaysia. That's my father, my mother, and my brother. I was born in Singapore in 1973, and I lived between Singapore and Malaysia moving back and forth in Asia until 1985. See, there's Malaysia, which is that small area over there. And then we immigrated to Canada in 1986. And I stayed in Canada, both in Vancouver and in Newfoundland, in Cowhead, Newfoundland, to be specific. So here's the picture of my family. That's me with the funny cap on in the peninsula in Cowhead, Newfoundland. This is my family, my crazy family, as you see, kind of colorful and festive. This is my father, who was a great influence on my life and also on my art. He was a poet, doctor, and businessman, and he also owned a nightclub in Singapore. He was famous in Singapore for having brought David Bowie for his first concert. Actually, my father introduced the first rock concert in Singapore back in like 1984, 85. This is my brother Kagan and sister-in-law Julia. The reason why I bring them into the picture is because even over and above networking, it's important that artists, that you have your foundation, meaning you've got your history, but also that there are people that you can turn to in life who understand you, support you, and provide you with guidance in your life. And very much my brother and sister-in-law are there for me. And my daughter, Xian, who always reminds me of why I'm doing all of this stuff. The wellsprings from my early artistic influences were Bistro de Toulouse-Lautrec and jazz. When I was about 11 years old, living in Singapore, my father, who was a doctor and a nightclub owner, he opened up a French restaurant called Bistro de Toulouse-Lautrec. It was the first French bistro in Singapore. And for me, it was wonderful because I love French food. And one of the things that my father did was he named it after the famous French painter Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and he covered the walls with these posters. And so for me, going into the restaurant almost every afternoon after school and eating my French onion soup, I would look at these pictures, and they were huge, they were life-size. And I really felt somehow that being in that ambiance, art was inside my life. Another big influence at the bistro, the Toulouse-Lautrec, was jazz. My father imported jazz musicians from all over North America to come and play. And so jazz entered into my life, and I developed at a very early age a deep passion for jazz. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Sarah Vaughan, and Miles Davis, Duke Ellington and his orchestra. So these are things that not only influenced my life in terms of entertainment, but also my artistic life. And they really fueled the work that came about afterwards. And also, when I moved to Vancouver in Canada, I felt very much estranged from my culture. I had left Asia, and since then, since 1986, I haven't stepped foot back in Asia. I've never learned how to speak Chinese because both of my parents spoke different dialects of Chinese, and at home we spoke English. So as a result, I was very much a foreigner in my own culture. And so at an early age, I developed a great passion for Chinese ink and watercolor painting. Though I couldn't understand the writing, I could understand the feelings behind the pictures. I could understand the compositions, and I was very excited by kind of the dynamic compositions and painterly works. So these are works by Qi Baishi, who was active from 1864 to 1957. And he's one of the most prominent Chinese ink painters from the last century. He kind of integrated both folkloric and the classical styles of Chinese ink painting. Now we move on to the beginning of my artistic career, my apprenticeship. At the tender age of, I guess it would have been 19 or 20, I left Vancouver and from Mexico. I was about 20 years old. And at that time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. I knew that I loved jazz and I loved painting and arts and culture, but I really didn't feel very. I really didn't feel that I could become myself at home, and so therefore I had to escape my family, and I decided to go to a place that was very far away, where they spoke another language, and then where my parents wouldn't follow me, and that was Mexico. And San Miguel de Allende, to be precise. This is a picture of San Miguel de Allende. San Miguel de Allende is an old colonial town in Mexico, one of the oldest colonial towns, in fact. And it's a fascinating and very picturesque city, full of artists, writers, poets. It has an incredible cultural life. And it brought together all kinds of artists, not only professional artists, but also Sunday painters, young emerging artists went to San Miguel to study at the local art schools. And so it was a great, foundation for me, because it was small, it was safe, there was a very tight community, and people were very, very supportive of one another. And even at the very beginning of my career, when I was starting to exhibit, other artists would be very supportive. They would come to my exhibition, they would invite me to their exhibitions, and I built a really good kind of community of artists, not just visual artists, but also musicians and poets. And we did things like we organized festivals and all kinds of cultural activities. And so it was great to have that. For me, that was my real education, much more so than Concordia University, because first of all, I was judged by my output. I was not judged by where I came from or what marks I got. There was no incentive really for anybody to give me a hand, because they weren't getting paid, right? Their paycheck didn't come from me being there, my presence. So it was a lot more natural. And I saw within that community all kinds of things. I saw things that worked, what worked with artists, what didn't work with artists. I got to know the small gallery scene over there. And it was a fascinating time. Also, San Miguel de Allende offered a lot of inspiration. And that's why so many artists like Pablo Neruda, Frida Kahlo, Cantinflas, spent time in San Miguel de Allende during its heyday. So if you look at these are the walls in San Miguel de Allende, and the mixture of plaster and cement and stone. It's an amazing place, very inspiring. Okay. And while I was in San Miguel de Allende, I met an artist named Mario Cabrera, who was a visual artist, a painter and sculptor who had done this training in Carrara, Italy. And during that time, I was kind of at a intersection in my life. I didn't know, in my artistic life, I wasn't sure where I was going to go in terms of medium, in terms of style. And so I was lamenting this fact to my friend Mario in a coffee shop, an Italian coffee shop. And I said, I at that time I was doing printmaking, and as a way of getting into drawing and painting, and I didn't know where to start. And he said, I want you to hit me. And I said, what? He said, no, I want you to hit me. And I said, I'm not going to hit you. He said, yeah, come on, hit me. And there we were seated at the coffee table. And he's in one chime on the other, just hit me as hard as you can, punch me. So I went and punched him, and he grabbed my hand like this. And then he looked at me, and he gave me the stare, and he says, you have the soul of a painter. I'm going to teach you. So for a couple of years, from that point forwards, Mario Cabrera was really my teacher, my maestro. And he taught me the rudiments of painting and drawing. And he helped me make me the artist that I am. Another person who was very influential in my artistic life was my great friend and my first collector, James Hawkins. James Hawkins had moved to San Miguel de Allende in the 1940s on the GI Bill, and he had spent time learning how to paint murals with the great muralist, Siqueiros. And he was someone who had a deep understanding of the arts, Also, very importantly, his wife was the director of the local art school, Bellas Artes. And so we made a very kind of unlikely, best friends. He must have been in his 70s. I was in my 20s. And he really encouraged me. And in fact, when I had my first exhibition, he was the first person who bought one of my prints. So it's really important as an artist to really cultivate relationships and look for support and look for friendships that help you grow. And just as there are friendships that can grow, there are friendships that don't grow. And when I was in San Miguel Allende, I got to know a fellow named the Shark. We used to call him El Tiburon for those of you who speak Spanish. And this fellow was a collector, and he was a very dubious fellow. He was terrible. He actually looked like a shark. And he used to roam the coffee shops, and he used to spend time like hanging around artists, and he would buy their works. But he would also hound the artists. He would give them impossible commissions. He gave one of my friends a commission to paint something like 80 paintings for a series of hotels. And I mean, he paid bottom rate. And this fellow, this collector, would hound that artist. He would follow the artist every time the artist would leave his home and go to the coffee shop or go and see people. He would hound them and just say, "Where's the painting? Where's the painting? Where's the painting?" And that particular friend of mine, artist, he had a burnout, complete burnout, because he couldn't deliver and he was under so much stress. So in life, it's also important to look out for the sharks. And I learned a lot, as much from the successes as well as the failures of my comrades in the arts. Also, while I was in San Miguel de Allende, I met a wide range of really interesting people. This is a painting of a person named Sanderson, and he used to do the floor lights. He used to do the decoration lights at Macy's. So another way that I got to know people was also by getting them to sit for portraits. So this is an etching, a portrait of Mr. Sanders. These are some of the works that I produced when I was there. I was influenced both by Chinese ink and watercolor painting, as well as Mexican art. And at that time, also my works, most of them had the Mexican, or should I say, Spanish titles. At the age of 26, I decided to leave San Miguel de Allende. At that time, I had kind of accomplished, I kind of hit the peak of what I could do there. I'd had held a couple of solo exhibitions. I had also started a festival there. And I didn't feel that I could actually go any further in my career. It's like you hit this glass ceiling and you've kind of exhausted all your possibilities. I had all the connections that I needed to kind of keep on going, but it wasn't exciting anymore. And so at that age 26, I moved to Montreal after having visited it during the Jazz Festival. So when I moved to Montreal in 1999, I embarked, at the same time that I was studying at Concordia University, I also embarked on paintings that were very much inspired, but also improvisations on what I thought of or perceived as Chinese ink painting. And so in these pieces, I kind of, I took Chinese calligraphy and then turned it upside down by producing works that sometimes look like calligraphy, but aren't. These are ink and wash on paper. And in these pieces, I was really trying to go for something quite cinematic and not only gestural, but also atmospherical. Just using black and white. Also, I worked in very, very large formats. This one's by 60 by 87 inches. And then I also worked in color with gouache. And community. At the same time, I started getting into doing performance work, very much related to my ink painting. As you can see, this may give you an idea of some of the processes that I use. I was painting on the floor, and I would lay my paper on the floor and then paint on it with black ink and brush. And this is an example of a performance piece that I did in front of an audience at Obro. And so this particular the start of this particular path towards performance, it really originated while I was at Concordia University. And during that time when I was working on certain projects, I would lay out my pieces on the floor, and then I would go to town on them. And I found what was curious is that some of the other students would just kind of sit around and watch me, not only because I took up so much space, but like they just found it interesting. And at one point, one of the students said to me, "This is really interesting what you're doing, right? It's like a performance." And I said, "Come on, get out of here," right? I thought it was a joke. And the odd thing is, 3 days later, I get a call from a festival, and they asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in giving a live performance painting piece?" And so this really kind of not only started me doing performances, it also helped me recognize something that was already embedded in my artistic practice, and that is the performance of making art. Here's an example of another performance that I did at in which I painted a large piece in front of an audience, accompanied by Sean Madevetsky, a tabla player. So basically, he played the tabla, and then I improvised to that. And once again, this was in front of a live audience. So it's a bit different from just having an exhibition where you put your works on the wall, people come and, they say polite things or they don't say anything at all. In this particular case, people, because it had such presence in the space, and they took place during like opening ceremonies and events like that. People were almost forced to sit there and watch it. And interestingly enough, because it was dynamic and it was very fast and very active, people found it interesting and often would come up to me and we would exchange contacts. And this led to a lot of different opportunities. Here's my studio, the studio I used to have in De Gaspé. This gives you a bit of an idea of some of the pieces that I worked on. It was a very large studio, and I started to film the actual process of making art. And I made these mini videos that I exhibited, in which I brought together the kind of sped up process of painting and improvisation with music. This gives you an idea of the scale. Here's a still frame from one of those videos. And for example, this piece, it's 9 feet by 3 feet. So it's huge. It takes up a lot of space. So I exhibited these works and started to get known for these kinds of large pieces. And then it was around, I would say maybe 2015, 2014-15, that I started to get approached by different organizations to curate exhibitions. And because I'd had so many of my own exhibitions before, I guess they felt that I would be a good candidate. And so I started curating exhibitions and became the curator of the visual arts program of Festival Axiazi. That's a festival that promotes Asian arts, histories, and cultures. And so I started to go outside the role of artist and actually curate shows, meaning, select. I didn't do any call for proposals. I would actually go out and scout for artists. And I would make a pre-selection of maybe 12 or 15, and then I would slowly narrow it down and pair up the artists, right? Sometimes it would be a grouping of 5 artists. Sometimes it would be 2, but I always made sure that it was that the artists that I showed together had work that was different, but somehow had some thematics or something that kind of brought them together beyond the obvious. And so here's an exhibition at Maison de la Culture Côte des Neiges, Pavitra Wickramasinghe and Hua Jin. It's a duo show. And so in this particular piece, and even though I'm a visual artist and I do performance and video, I mostly showed work that was very different from what I did. So in terms of medium, there's photography, video, installation, and sometimes painting. So here in this piece, this photo, you'll see the actual installation of the work, very large scale. This work is photography by Hua Jin. Here's another. This is a piece by Pavitra Wickramasinghe. These are 2 artists who have since started to become very well known here in Montreal, and have both won a lot of accolades and prizes. Yeah. Also, another thing that I did was I organized not only the exhibitions themselves, but I also put together showcases, cultural mediation activities, so that we could bring in members of the public. In this particular case, we brought in students who were learning French at the local language school, who were learning francisation. And so we brought them in to that space, and we would give them a tour. I would give them a tour along with the cultural mediator, and we would talk and explain about the works. And it was a great way to kind of introduce these kinds of contemporary works to a community or communities or individuals who are normally not kind of in contact with it. Most of them were nouveau arrivants. They were new immigrants. And also some of them had been through very traumatic experiences with war and really terrible things. So what was interesting is that often when they came into these tours, they would be some of them would be very quiet. You'd have a couple of talkative ones. But by talking about the works, by explaining the works, and by encouraging dialogue, I saw a lot of the wallflowers, the ones who were very quiet, also they started to speak about their experiences. And so that was a very enriching experience. And it also helped to extend my reach. I made sure, by the way, that every time I had these shows, that I always, gave out my business cards, that I always took down people's numbers and contacts if they didn't have business cards. And I made very, very long Excel lists identifying people I'd met. Like even if it was a student and they gave me their number, they gave me their email, I would write things like, from Afghanistan, has a 2-year-old daughter. So I made sure that I had very, very specific information. And I did that also at vernissages as well. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then I had a breakthrough in what would have been 2016. I presented the work of a Mongolian photographer at Le Monument National. And this was done with Festival Axiazi in collaboration with the Embassy of Mongolia to Canada that had approached Festival Axiazi to organize the show. And this was an example of, if you haven't had it in your professional careers, I certainly hope you do, because sometimes you can work on your artwork, or you can work on your projects really hard, and it's so hard to hit the mark. You have an exhibition, and sometimes only your friends and family will show up. In this particular case, we had a show, and it was in March of 2006. We had a lot of competition. There was Nuit Blanche was on around the same time, and our show was like on a Tuesday or Wednesday evening. And so we really pushed hard for the marketing. We really pushed hard to make it a quality show. And to our huge surprise, we had an incredible turnout. We had over 600 people at the exhibition. There were so many people at the exhibition that at one point, I went to the Washington Monument National, which is a theater, and I came out, and there was a lineup going out the door. And I thought that the audience was waiting to go upstairs to a show. So I went over to the security guard and I said, what show are they for? And they said, they're here for your guys' show. So that was like an incredible moment, really magical. We had, as I mentioned before, over 600 visitors. We had many members of the small Mongolian community participated. Here's a photo of the exhibition. Here's another thing which was really important. Previously, when I was just focusing on my own exhibitions, I didn't really document my own work that much. I was really kind of focused on making the work and getting the damn thing on the wall, making sure it looked good. Whereas as a curator, I started to see things from a very different perspective, right? I started looking at my relationships very differently. When I put on a show, I had to develop fantastic relationships with the director of the institution, with the administration, with the technicians. I mean, you guys have, you put up your show at Artch, I'm sure that you've had to deal with technicians, right? And they are an essential part of any exhibition. Having a really good rapport and relationship with technicians can often spell the difference between a good show and a great show. Because the technicians who have got great experiences and great eyes, they will come up with fantastic recommendations. Like they'll say, you might have this idea to put it over there, but in my experience working here for 15 years, I think, the best space is right over here, because the light will hit your sculpture at such and such an angle, and you will have it will have good solid illumination for 6 hours of the day. So there are things like that which are really important that help not only professionally but also help personally. I have, everywhere that I've shown as an artist or technician, as an artist or as a curator, I've always kept the contacts of everybody I've worked with, so that every time I have a show, I make sure that I let them know. The ones that I like, of course, the ones that I grew up with. I also have a very large client list and a very large mailing list. So when I have an event or something that I want to promote, I let everybody know. And also, I've had opportunities also to hire these same technicians that hung my shows, right? So going back to this particular event, we also had the ambassador of Mongolia to Canada was there. Here we also had music. This is Julien Rousseau, and you can see it was so packed full of people that you could hardly even move. They even brought a traditional Mongolian yurt, which is a tent, into the Monument National. And here are the people who worked on it. And another thing that really helped was we had wonderful Mongolian vodka, and they were dousing everybody with that. That always helps. Make sure when you're doing vernissages, if you can afford it, make sure you've got some good booze and really good things to eat. That helps make friends as well. Here's another show that I organized after at the Maison de la Culture Frontenac with an artist from New Delhi, Anchal Malhotra, and a German artist named Margaret Nielsen. So I really kind of spread myself out as well in terms of the shows and venues, like where I showed the works. And I always made sure that when I had the exhibitions, that I also had discussions with the artists. That always helped. I also kind of augmented my activities and started doing master classes. So I organized here a series of master classes at Festival Axiazi. We presented this at the Obro New Media Lab. We had an actress, Milandine Rubik, Yang Chang, who's a prominent documentary filmmaker, Kid Koala, who's a scratch DJ, and Annie Rollins, a puppeteer and Rhodes Scholar. So they gave these workshops, these intensive workshops or master classes. And so this was another way that I was able to network, was to reach out into different communities and diversify, and then bring in artists and experts and specialists in their fields. And because these master classes were, they were long, they were like 7 hours, people got to spend the whole day together. So, we would have the beginning of the master class, like a whole the morning, and then lunchtime we'd all have lunch together. Lunch was included, and so what happened is that made people communicate, and so what's really interesting is some of those the artists and participants ended up doing projects with each other and getting gigs. So here's another way to network, is to, like in this particular case, by doing that, I also was able to kind of really build a reputation as someone who could bring people together and create exciting experiences. Right. And I documented all of this. Every time I work on a project, I took hundreds of photos, and then I would select the best photos and put them either on my website or put them on Facebook or LinkedIn to kind of let the public outside know what I was doing, and more than that, to also try to get people to come, to kind of drum up business, get people interested in what was happening, get people excited. And during this time, I guess due to the success that I had as a curator, I started getting involved, or I kind of augmented my volunteerism and community engagement. And so for the last 20 years, I have been active advancing equity, diversity, inclusion in the education, arts, and culture sector. And around the time, I guess after Festival Axiazi, I was invited by the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, which is the Municipal Arts Council, to sit as a member of the evaluation committee for new artistic practices in multidisciplinary sector. So from moving from artist to cultural worker or curator, up a step to becoming a jury member, and becoming someone that different organizations and institutions could rely on for expertise. And so I've been with them from 2017 till now. As a member of the evaluation committee, I not only evaluate grants, but I also get to go to a lot of events and a lot of activities like theater, pieces, performances. And so that also increases my scope in terms of my knowledge of the arts and cultural milieu in Montreal. But it also provides me with a lot of networking opportunities. And through this, I've met countless connections in the arts and culture sphere, and also in government. Yeah. And here you'll see, these are the. I'm in this picture. I'm with one of the members of former members of the evaluation committee, but also with the director of the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, Nathalie Maillet, and Frédéric is there as well, and as the cultural agent. So I extended my reach even further from before, in the sense that I got to know other at the committee, other cultural workers who were active on the scene, who were doing really interesting work, and who had a vast knowledge of what was happening here in Montreal. And then I guess kind of adding to what I was doing before, to that momentum, I was also invited to join the English Language Arts Network, and I've been with them since 2018. I've sat on their board as representative for the visual arts. I'm currently the vice president of the executive committee, and I'm also president or chair, I should say, not president, chair of the inclusion committee. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, ELAN is an organization that supports, connects, and creates opportunities for Quebec's English-speaking artists and arts communities. They also offer a lot of great resources for artists, especially during the pandemic. You can find the resources and lots of really helpful information online on their website. And so here we go. This brings together, like, these are some of the board members. It gives you the board members represent different disciplines. So I've kind of extended myself from visual arts out into a platform or a forum in which there's dialogue between different disciplines. So you've got a lot of people from film here, theater, and performance and dance. During the past 20 years, I've been involved with Festival Axiazi. It's a festival that promotes Asian arts, histories, and cultures. When I first moved to Montreal, I really didn't know anybody. And nobody knew me. And one of my first connections was the festival. At that time, I guess 99, the festival was really small. It was kind of grassroots. And they really helped make Montreal my home. And through the festival, I've gotten to not only have exhibition opportunities or opportunities to curate, but also it's kind of extended my kind of artistic family here in Montreal. So it's a very, very big and important connection in my professional and personal life. I was the vice president of the board of directors and a member of the steering committee. So I have about 10 years connection, activity with them. Here we go. Here's a picture of some of the fabulous bunch at the festival. I'm currently working as a curator and project manager at the festival. I developed and I'm delivering a project in inclusive practices. It's called the Abilities Project, and it features an artist with cerebral palsy, Azelia Kaviani. So over the last while, I guess I've started to become known for my activism, my advocacy in terms of inclusive practices, especially when it comes to persons and artists with handicaps. So our goal is to present an exhibition by Azelia Kaviani, as well as a performance in dance in the next while. And so here you see this is a choreographer, Rebecca, who's providing adapted training, dance training to this artist. So all of that, I mean, there's a certain progression from kind of just working as an artist and, by myself in the studio, having, exhibitions in visual arts, and kind of branching out, and it gets bigger and bigger. And the more that I was out there in the community, the more active I was, the more I guess I built the semblance of a reputation. And through that good networking, I guess that helped to increase media coverage and visibility. Especially when it comes to themes like immigration and in Montreal, diversity in the arts. And so as a result of that, during the last 2 years, I've had some opportunities to appear on TV. For any of you, I don't know whether any of you have had the opportunity to be on TV, but it can be a bit of a harrowing experience, and it's very fast and very strange, but it's kind of fun. So here I am at an interview, a TV interview at Ma TV, Mille Visages. So there we go. And here's another one for Radio Canada, Entrée Principale. They asked me about my experience as an immigrant here in Montreal. So for some funny reason, I guess I've become a little bit like one of the go-to people for this. And what's really interesting is that the TV interviews that I've had, most recent ones, have all been in French. I mean, the wonderful thing about any kind of project that brings people together is that at its best you can create a family or the semblance of a family, and as is the case with any family, you're going to get people who get along, people don't get along. But seeing as we're artists and we're oddballs, as the late Dexter Gordon would say, it's really important, I think, to build a kind of solidarity and also look out for each other. One of the important things that I learned while under apprenticeship with Mario Cabrera, the painter and sculptor from Mexico, one of the things that I learned was it's being an artist is almost like being a knight. There's certain values that one should adhere to. And it's a very noble profession. It's a very difficult profession, but it's very noble. And so he helped us instill in me not just the craft, the fine craft of making art, but also the fine craft of building relationships, the fine craft of passing on whatever whatever I can, or sharing information, helping people out. One of the great things, I guess, about my experiences is that they've given me a lot of resources and a lot of contacts, so that when I do, come across artists who are having a hard time, or people asking, well, where can I get a grant for such and such a thing, or can you give me a hand? I often make myself available to give them a hand, because I was fortunate enough to have people support me and help me out, not only as I was beginning my career, but even now, because as Hemingway once wrote, "No man is an island," or should I say, "No man or woman is an island unto themselves or herself." So without further ado, we're going to start with the second part. Are you guys ready? Okay, so now we are at part 2, networking in the arts, networking principles and techniques. All right, so now we get to kind of to hit some of the concepts. What is networking? The definition of network in American English, as opposed to English or Spanish English or other kinds of Englishes, is it's a group formed from parts that are connected together. It's a network. It's also a group of people with the same interests. So in your particular case, visual arts, the arts in general, that's a great point of interest. The verb network means to make an effort to meet and talk with a lot of people, especially in order to get information that can help you. Oops. Simply put, networking is building a connection with people and getting to know others. It's creating a community of people with the same interests, and meeting and talking to a lot of people in order to further your professional career. To my mind, there are 4 levels of connections or interrelationships. And this isn't really something that I would say is normally tackled or has been tackled in the networking workshops that I've attended. And this is kind of based on I guess I built this kind of philosophy or these kinds of categories through my experience. The first level in terms of relationships or interrelationships is intimate, meaning desert island people. And these can be personal and professional. In part 1, I've revealed to you some of my desert island people. I've got my brother there. I've got my sister-in-law, and I've got my daughter. I also have my cat, but he really doesn't do very much. But it's important to have desert island people. And a desert island person is someone who is really there for you, who is there for through thick and thin, someone who can really critique and give sound advice. And my definition is also someone who isn't looking to gain themselves. You don't want people on a desert island who are going to have enjoyment from your suffering, or who gain enjoyment from that. So it's really important that you've got desert island people. And desert island people come in all shapes and forms. Some of them are very practical. Some of them are completely impractical. But they're there because somehow they help boost you up. They give you sustenance. And those at the very top, because those are the most important. Those are also the relationships that you want to really nurture through a lifetime. Level 2 is friendly, which is not so, it's warm, but not as intimate. Friendly in terms of, and they can be personal and professional. Friendly are people that you enjoy seeing. You get together once in a while, whether it be to critique each other's works. You can call them for advice. You hang with them. These are friendly people, right? Those are important too, because those are the kinds of people who, even though they're not intimate, they're interested in your career. They're interested in you as a person. and they want to see you do well. Acquaintances are a little bit further backwards. They can be personal and professional, but they're just people that they're on the way to something else, right? If you want to get to someone, you call your acquaintance. If you want to get a hold of someone, maybe you call your acquaintance. So your acquaintance is never really a destination. And most acquaintances are people that you kind of like, but you don't really have much in common. They don't really turn you on. You don't get a smile on your face when you see them. I'm sure that you've got a lot of acquaintances like that, where you're walking down the street, or you go into a gallery and you see an artist that they're an acquaintance, and it's like, hey, how you doing? Fantastic. What projects are you working on? And you're just basically kind of updating each other for maybe half a minute or so, and then it's wonderful seeing you. It's great to know that you're doing so well. We should catch up sometime, but you never do. Those are acquaintances. And then there's the danger zone. The danger zone is toxic people to be avoided. And these are people who have hidden agendas. These are people who profit from any misery that you may go through. These are people who really don't have good intentions. So the danger zone, you want to stay away from people in the danger zone. And it's really important that through experience you learn to decipher which level of people your relationships fall into. Now, what are the keys to successful networking? I believe that they are to be yourself, warts and all, to be truly who you are. They say that, often art and artists, their work that they produce has to do with their own identity. And I think the identity should not only be in the work, but be in who you are as a person and who you are professionally. So that also means to be a successful networker means to be present, to be in the moment, to not be thinking, what am I going to do 5 years from now? How am I going to use this person to get to something? It's really to be in the moment, enjoy the moment, and enjoy that relationship or that communication with the person who's in front of you. Be engaged. Make sure that, for example, in the arts, if you have an opportunity to be in an environment or to be in a community that you don't know very much about, you can learn a lot about them. So, for example, if you're in visual arts and you don't know much, you haven't had much contact with the dance or performance community, and you've got for example, an event where you get an opportunity to meet these people, it's a wonderful way to be engaged and kind of learn new things. Be interested. I think in my experience, people are interested in people who are interested in them. And people like to talk about themselves. They like to say, well, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm doing. They want to be appreciated for who they are. And so if you're interested in them, genuinely interested, that really helps. Be passionate, meaning, be passionate about your work. Be passionate about, activities that you get involved with. That also makes you much more attractive and interesting to network with. Be a good listener. This is a hard one. Really listen to people. Try to figure out, what are they trying to communicate? Are they getting the message across to me? These are really important. Other keys to successful networking: seek common values. If you're someone who prides themselves on their integrity, well, seek people who have that same kind of value. Or, for example, if you're someone who really values community, seek people who also value and engage in the community and help others. Seek common interests. So that can be art forms, for example, painting or writing. It can, you can also add on to that other interests that you may have. For example, it may be someone in the arts or collector who's interested in the arts, but they love tennis and you love tennis. Well, go and play tennis with them. Be consistent. This is really important. It's very difficult to be consistent all the time. Life is peaks and valleys, but consistency really helps. And in my particular case, I would say in the earlier part of my career, when I first moved to Montreal, I was not very consistent because I went through like a decade of really hard times, right? So I would pop in, pop out. And so I wasn't consistently showing my artworks. I wasn't consistently present. But the last couple of years I have, and it makes a really big difference because when you are consistent, when people know that you arrive on time, when people know that you're enjoyable to work with, if people know that your artwork is solid, then they're more likely to buy your artwork. They're more likely to hire you to work on a project or to collaborate on a project, right? Be professional, meaning, like for example, my style is kind of a mixture of professional and informal. But when I write, I'm always very professional, right? When I send in an application, if I send in a project proposal or budget, it's dead on, right? I always try to make sure it's as solid as possible. And I'm always striving to improve myself professionally. And so I try to bring that to any kind of activity that I'm engaged with. Present yourself well. I tend to like wearing suits and ties, right? And in my experience, I've been, I've worked and I've also collaborated with many people in different spheres of life, from janitors to waiters, all the way up to government officials, ambassadors. So I make sure that I always present myself well to everyone because I'm always looking to connect with people because I'm interested in people. And as much as I'm interested in people, one of the things that's really important to understand, and this took me a while, and that is understand you can't be everybody's best friend. You can't be I would say avoid being a people pleaser, because if you try to connect with people in order to please them, in order to fit what they're looking for, right, then you're kind of denying who you are. And I think at the heart of hearts, people appreciate people who are genuine and people who are authentic. And so the more authentic you can be or strive to be, the better. Other keys to successful networking, search for authenticity. Here's another thing. You can't really find depth in shallow waters. In my earlier years, I spent a lot of time kind of flâner, kind of hanging out, kind of not doing very much with my artistic friends. And it's good to hang once in a while, but at certain points, I found that the people that I was around really didn't do very much, and actually weren't. It's not that they weren't. They had to accomplish great things, but they weren't moving anywhere. They weren't interested in really moving around. And so I found out at a certain time I couldn't find any depth in those kinds of shallow waters, right? In terms of relationships, I always think long term, not short term. Short term would be, for example, if I work on an exhibition, I disregard the people that I'm working with because it's only a short-term gig, and once I'm done, I'm out of there. That's something that I've never done. I've always tried to look at the long term and saying, I'm going to be, I'm installing this exhibition at the Maison La Culture or this gallery for 3 days. I'm going to be involved with them for the next month and a half and a whole bunch of activities. But I want to make sure that this relationship continues beyond this, whether it's with the gallery director or the gallery assistant. I shoot them an email once in a while. I will invite them to different things, even if it's just for coffee, right? That way you're maintaining contact. One's not being a parasite. Invest in building meaningful connections and experiences, because your life is a combination of all of these things that you go through, and you want to make sure that whatever you live through has great value and that you can tell a great story. Now, where can you meet influential connections in the arts? Well, everywhere. And then I'll give you an example of that. I've got a friend whom I've known for about, I guess, almost 20 years. a very prominent artist who's recently received a lot of accolades. And I've only seen this friend once in a while, once a year or maybe twice a year. Once in a while, a couple of years back, we went off on a trip to the country. But it's someone that I really enjoy seeing, but I don't see very much. Most recently, maybe a month and a half ago, I ran into him while I was shopping for toilet paper on Park Avenue. And I'm talking to the guy, and it's COVID time. COVID is kind of tough for everybody. And I was kind of feeling a bit blue. And, asking him, how are you doing? And then he said, well, I'm doing okay. And then he said something that really surprised me. He says, you know what? I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking about your artworks. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, who's thinking about my artworks right now? And he says, yeah, I've been going through your website, and I love your pieces, man. And I go, okay, that's great. And he says, yeah, I love, the ink and the wash pieces, and I love those pseudo calligraphy pieces. I'd like to come by and to your studio and have a look at them sometime. And I thought, okay, this is really encouraging. And then he said, if I come to your place, I'll make sure I wear a mask and all of that. So and then he actually followed up a couple of weeks later and he says, yeah, I'd like to come and visit your studio. He actually emailed me, so I want to come and visit your studio. And I thought, okay, well, it is COVID, but all right, let's do it. So I arranged for a studio visit. I cleaned up my studio in my apartment. Everything was immaculate. I bought some good coffee. I made sure that I had the balcony was all perfect for his visit. So he came to visit. We had some wonderful coffee. We sat around and talked and caught up for a while. And then we proceeded to look at my artwork. Now, I had prepared in advance all of my art pieces and portfolios, and he had actually identified specific pieces that he wanted to see. So he was really serious, right? I very rarely have I come across a client like that. He named all of the pieces. And so I prepared my price list. I prepared all of the artworks. I stacked them up so that we could access them right away. And so we went and we looked through the pieces, and he picked a whole bunch, and he was like a kid in a candy shop. He said, oh my God, I love this one, man. This one's fantastic. Oh man. And he kept doing this. Oh my God. And then once in a while, he'll take out the cellular phone and take pictures of the work and send it to his girlfriend. He says, yeah, I think I got to have this one. And so we're wrapping up the studio visit, and I'm putting pieces away. And at one point, I lift up a portfolio and expose a print that I made many years ago. He says, what's that? What's that? And I go, what do you mean? He says, what's that? That color? Wait, I got to see that. And I said, okay. So I pull it out and I show him. He says, oh my God, this blows my mind. I mean, I have never had that reaction from any client or member of the public. And so he sent the pictures to his girlfriend, and he said, yeah, I want these, man. And in the end, I actually sold 2 pieces, and they more than paid the rent. But here's an example of, when you don't expect it in life, sometimes you can even be down and out, but you've made connections, you've developed relationships with people. And sometimes these angels come from heaven. They come down, and that's what it is. So you can really meet them everywhere. Sometimes, there are times when, I've gone really hard to make a sale, right? And I thought I had that bite, and it just went away. It's like fishing. And sometimes when you don't really expect it, things come in. And so the best thing you can do is really plant your seeds all over the place and hope that you get the best thing blossoming. So now we're going to move to the elevator pitch. The official, definition of an elevator pitch is a short description of an idea, product, company, or oneself that explains the concept in such a way that any listener can understand it in a short period of time. The name elevator pitch reflects the idea that should be possible to deliver the summary in the time span of an elevator ride, or approximately 30 seconds or 2 minutes. This is something that they often teach in networking events. Almost every networking event I've been to, they've spoken about it, and they've really they've really pushed it. I myself am not a big fan of elevator pitches. And I'll show you what mine is. My elevator pitch is I'm a visual artist, curator, and cultural worker. I create large interdisciplinary painting, performance, and video installations that deal with the transitory nature of life through the beauty of gesture and improvisation. That for me is really boring. Like, it doesn't really capture the full essence of who I am and what my artwork is, and it doesn't feel natural. So even though I do have an elevator pitch that I use once in a while, especially in a kind of a professional or presentation context, when I'm dealing on one-on-one or a group, I like to just be myself, right? When I meet people in general, what I try to do is find some kind of connection above just presenting myself and saying, I am this, I am that. I try to find topics of conversation that are interesting. Sometimes I will go to conferences, and if I'm particularly interested in a conference presenter, I will go up to that person, talk to them about their ideas, and then at a certain point, they always ask me, "So, what do you do?" And that's when I say, "Well, my name's Kakim. I'm a visual artist, curator, cultural worker, and I've been actively blah blah blah." Right? And I try to make sure that when I do say it, that it comes from where I'm at that moment, not something that's pre-planned. Because even this elevator pitch, I couldn't recite it by heart. And I think the important thing is really, if you want to connect, is to have a general idea of what you're trying to convey, but try to make it natural as possible. Now, here's some advice for networking in person, the initial contact. This applies generally to non-COVID times, but I guess now it also applies to COVID. COVID has brought with it its share of health concerns and woes, and the artistic community is not immune from that. And so, with that in mind, do bear in mind that this list is mainly for in-person networking, but can now sometimes be applied to online. In the cases of, for example, like online vernissages or conferences. So I'll go through this list. In general times, great way to network, especially in the visual arts, is going to art galleries. Art galleries. Just go to art galleries, whether when they're having vernissages, or, for example, you can even go to art galleries on quiet days or evenings. And depending on the situation, you can talk to the artist, or talk to the staff, or talk to the gallery owners. In general, I find that here in Montreal, as opposed to other cities, gallery owners are pretty approachable. And if they're not, they're really not worth getting to know. I think the best galleries employ staff who are professional, but also courteous, and know how to greet the public as they come in. And so, going to art galleries is a good way. I wouldn't generally encourage you to go in with your portfolio in there to sell something, unless you've got an appointment in advance. I would say just go in and get to know the galleries and what kind of work they present, what kind of roster of artists. Think about whether their gallery fits your work, not the other way around. Find out what the people are like. It's a great way to scout. And that applies, in fact, to most of these institutions. Find out about those people. Can you jive with them? Would you feel proud hanging your artwork in their venue? So Art Galleries is a great way to meet people. Artist-run centers, for example, artist-run centers like the Clark Gallery, when they have exhibitions in person, that's a great way to meet people, other artists, curators, members of the committee members or selection committee members. And it's best, I find, it's really helpful to meet people in kind of non-formal settings where people are much more relaxed, where people are there in the social, professional context. Vernissages, once again, are a really good way to meet people. And also figure out, in terms of like not only to meet people, but also figure out what kind of venues show what kind of work. Like if you take Maison de la Culture, some of them are more geared towards a certain kind of work than others. Artist talks are a great way to meet people. The Museum of Contemporary Arts and Museum of Fine Arts, and most art galleries regularly have artist talks, and it's very flattering for artists and curators to get questions from the public, from the audience, and to meet people. And so that's a great way to go and approach them. Even though you might have, for example, eventually the idea in mind to show your work, or you're interested in getting them to curate your work. First of all, go there and show your interest. Have a dialogue. Figure out what they're about. Let them figure out what you're about. Art fairs are also very good. Art fairs are a little much more mercenary in the terms that most of the galleries are there really to sell. So they're not going to have a lot of time to kind of hobnob with artists because they're trying to get clients. They're trying to make deals. But it is a good way to go in, get a feeling for who's working there, what kind of work they have up, take a measure of their prices, and also their reach, right? What kind of clients do they have? You will see immediately when you go art fairs what their thing is. Museums are a great place to network. Museums have not only vernissages, but they also have sometimes artist tours, and that's a great way to kind of naturally meet artists and museum workers. Universities. Here in Montreal, in Fine Arts, we've got Concordia and UQAM. Universities are a great way to meet other artists and students, not only within the programs themselves, but also outside. If you are members, if you're alumni of universities, they will regularly send you activities, arts and cultural activities that you can attend. And of course, arts and cultural events, things like within visual arts, but even outside. There's events like Pop Montreal that sometimes have components for the visual arts. We're seeing with festivals, multidisciplinary festivals, more combinations of different artistic disciplines. So that really keeps it fresh and also increases the opportunities for showing your work. You yourself can be proactive in hosting and organizing activities. Vernissages, for example. Vernissages are not just an occasion to celebrate your exhibition and see your friends, but a great way to meet and hobnob with new clients, meet other influential people in the arts. In my earlier years, I didn't really put much attention to vernissages. I just basically bought booze and just let it run loose. Whereas as I gained more experience, I kind of curated my vernissages. So the work on the wall isn't just like the art exhibition isn't just curated. The vernissage, the cocktail itself, the choice of drinks, the choice of food, who you invite, contact list, inviting people. It's always good to invite people and then get them to invite other people. Right? Hosting artist talks where you get the opportunity to talk about your art and your experiences. You can participate in conferences, right? If you're a hard abstract expressionist, you could perhaps find your way into a conference to talk about that. Studio tours are also quite useful. I would say studio tours and visits. The example that I gave earlier, that's an example of a studio visit. A client made an arrangement to come visit my studio. And I took him for a tour of my apartment, of my studio, and we selected artworks. That's a great way to connect with people and to make sales. An exhibition tour. When you have an exhibition, make sure you've got several different activities, not just a vernissage and then the end of it. Make sure that it's got some feet. Organize some exhibition tours so that you book time blocks for your contacts to come and visit. And then another thing you can do to give them a bit of an incentive is to make sure that when they come for the tour, that perhaps you can line up some drinks for them, or you can line up some samosas or some good food. People always appreciate that. You can also host arts and cultural events. Get busy or get involved in working with other festivals, with other organizations, in organizing events, as either as a volunteer or even as an employee. That is a wonderful way to connect with people. So networking, prepare, dress well, dress for the scene. Make sure that you are representing yourself well. Do your research beforehand. For example, if you're going to a conference or a curator's talk, research the artist bios. Get a little bit of a summary of their career even before you go, so that you've got an idea of some of the questions that you can ask. A lot of the connections that I've made have been from really delving in deep into into the bios and asking kind of very in-depth questions during conferences. Make sure that you arrive at an appropriate time, not too late, not too early. Just make sure that if you arrive right before the event, you'll get an idea to get a reading of the audience, what they're like. And also, more importantly, you'll get a reading of where the best place is to situate yourself. I think in real estate, they say location is everything. Make sure you plant yourself in the best real estate, right? And that way you have a greater chance of meeting people. Make sure you bring your business cards with links to your website, Instagram, with links to any kind of social media which best presents your work. I myself have a business card, and one side is text, and on the flip side, I have an image of my artwork. So when people ask, "Oh, so what do you do?" "I'm a visual artist." "Oh, can I have your card?" "Oh, here." I give them the card, and then I flip it, and I say, "Here's an example of what I do." And then they start asking me questions. "Oh, what is that?" Right? That becomes a topic of conversation, and actually works better sometimes than trying to push my elevator pitch, right? Which for me isn't really natural. Another thing which is important is, as visual artists, people, if they're interested in you and in your artwork, most likely they'd like to be able to see some pictures. So bring some images of your work on your iPhone, right? On your iPad, so that they can see just a couple. But make sure that the pieces that you show them are really the strongest pieces, that they're blockbusters. Let's see. So just in general, my ploy or my process is, when I'm networking, I first of all try to establish contact with the person. I try to connect with the person, and then there's a conversation, there's an exchange, and then I exchange information. I never leave without trading business cards or contact info. That's really essential, because it gives me also an excuse to contact them, whether it be a couple of days later, or, for example, a couple of months later, they pop into my mind and I think, you know what, I'd like to invite this person to come to this activity. You can always say, "I met you at such and such a place. We exchanged cards. You gave me your contact." Sometimes artists can feel a little bit, intimidated by doing that, because maybe they feel that they're being pushy. But to my mind, if you're sending someone an email, or if you're contacting them after a good conversation, a discussion that you've had, then there's nothing to feel anxious about, because you're just following through with being gracious. This is an example of a case where I'm trying to meet someone that I haven't met before, right? It could be, for example, the director of an institution. It could be, for example, an artist that I'm trying to get to come into a show. I may contact, like a cold call. Say, if I cold call them, I may email them and then ask for an appointment. I may actually go to an event that they're participating in and go talk to them, right? And try to establish connection, right? And through that, I try to develop an exchange to figure out, okay, so if I want this person on board, what am I looking for? What would they be looking for, right? If I'm trying to get my exhibition into a show, I try to find a way so that I can work into my pitch. How the show would benefit them or benefit their institution. So that's a kind of an example. Another thing which is really important is to measure engagement, interest, or disinterest. So engagement is when you're talking to someone and you can feel that they're really engaged, they're looking at you, not staring at you, but they're actively engaged, they're responding. That shows interest. In other cases, there is disinterest. I have been to networking events, and sometimes networking events are the worst because everybody is there just to network. I went to a networking event a couple of years ago, and I remember going up to one of the organizers who was there to connect people. And I had been sent there by one of the organizations that I'm involved with just to kind of suss it out. And I went up to the person, I was just about to speak, and this person said, "Cut to the chase, what do you want?" For me, that doesn't spell any interest. And I said, "I was just going to chat with you, but I want nothing. Thank you. Bye. Thank you for your time." You don't want to spend time with people who are not interested in you or who won't actually put in the time, right? So it's really important to gauge their interest and also gauge for yourself. Are you really interested in them? Is this someone that you'd really want to have a conversation with, or maybe further down the line have a professional working relationship with? So it's a kind of a give and take. It's like a dance. Engagement, interest, disinterest. Also, another thing which is important is when you're networking, sometimes you will come across people, and I'm sure you have too in your experiences, who only talk about themselves. Right? "Hey, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine. I'm working on this project, blah, blah, blah." But they never ask you anything. They never say, "Oh, what do you do?" Or "What's your name?" Or anything about yourself. I sometimes come across people who, and this is, I hope, thankfully it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes I come across people who come up to me and they say, "Hey, how are you doing?" I say, "Good." And then they start telling me about what they're working on, and then saying, "How can you help me? I'd like you to help me." But they've never even asked me like anything else, like, "What are you working on?" And that often points to a kind of one-sided relationship. So you really want to make sure that you look out for that, because you're not going to have great engagement with people who just expect to be fed but don't feed, but don't exchange. Really important that action is interest, lack of action is lack of interest. It's the same for conversation, and the same for an email or an exchange. In person, for example, if they're not fully engaged in the conversation, if at the end of a conversation they don't reciprocate and give you their business card, it means it's a lack of interest, right? And it's very difficult to take a lack of interest and to convert it into interest. Action equals interest, meaning if someone reciprocates, gives you their business card, or says, "You know what, there's someone I should present you to, that someone you should meet. Let's get together next Tuesday or next Saturday," or that's interest. So it's really important to kind of gauge that. Also, don't be put off by cold shoulders. Cold shoulders cannot keep you warm. The arts is not immune to this. There will always be people who are rude, the people who have poor social graces. And when you come across those people, sometimes it's very easy to feel that somehow, well, did I offend this person? Why are they being so cold to me? And if you really can't see how you might have inconvenienced them, then I would say just like don't take it personally, right? So cold shoulders can't keep you warm. So my advice is look for warm shoulders. Another very important thing is hello and goodbye. In any kind of social or networking activity, or even professional activity, when I participate in the evaluations committees for Conseil des Arts de Montréal, I always make sure that when I come in, I say hello to everybody. I greet everybody without exception. Find out how are they doing, what have you been up to, right? Before we start to work. At the end of a meeting, I always thank them. I always say thank you, goodbye. And sometimes I will follow up with an email or a text saying, hey, it was good seeing you. It's good to keep that up. So as a follow-up to the initial meeting, email and contact the contact within 3 business days is best. Thank him or her and tell the person how you found the exchange. Be honest, show interest. Always look for something in that particular conversation that is complementary, right? So even though you might have a conversation with someone and there's some areas which kind of went into the shadows or that weren't hotspots, always try to find what was the highlight of that conversation and highlight it. It shows the person that you care, that you appreciated, that you valued the conversation. If you don't have an activity in mind to propose to them, or you have low interest in that particular contact, you can just ask them to keep you informed of their projects. That's my standard. It's a polite way of saying, okay, well, there's nothing really happening right now, but just let me know. Keep me in the cards. If you're really interested, you can propose an activity, right? Like a meeting or an informal interview for career advice. For example, if there's a particular artist that has had some success or works in a similar vein as you, perhaps you'd want to get to know this person and ask them advice on, well, how did you shape your career, right? Can you give me advice? I'm an emerging artist. It's a weird term, emerging. It's like emerging out of a swamp. But I think artists who've achieved some stature and who've been through the school of hard knocks and have seen a bit of life are generally quite generous and generally very open to helping younger artists. So take advantage of your youth while you got it. You can propose a studio visit, right? For example, you may have met someone who really likes your work and you said, you like those? Wait till you come to my studio. It gets even better. Propose an event. If you like alcohol, and many artists do, propose a beer. Hey, let's grab a beer after the exhibition. Or grab a coffee or grab something to discuss a project. But do that, if possible, within the next 10 days. And make sure that if you are proposing, have in mind what activity you're going to propose. Give a specific date, time, and location. That's also a very good way to gauge interest, because if they accept, it means that they're interested. If they don't accept and they don't give you an alternative date, like, oh, I can't do it Monday, that I can do it on Thursday evening. Does that work for you? If they don't do that, it means that the interest is so-so or they're very busy. But that's really important to make sure that you're proactive and that you propose stuff. Keep the connection alive. Help the relationship grow and evolve. Networking online. One sec. Networking online simulation. Oh, yes. Going back to contact and connection. If you're cold calling or emailing someone, it's always good to have a referral from your existing contacts. Like, for example, if there's a curator whose work you particularly appreciate and you know one of the artists that this person curated, you can ask the artist, hey, I'd really like to pick the curator's mind about the hanging of the show. It was so innovative. Do you think that would be okay if I if I use you as a referral? Sure. So that way, when you contact the curator, you can say, such and such a person suggested they gave me a contact, suggested I call you, right? But show interest. But having referrals from existing contacts helps, whether you're trying to secure a curator, a show, or even grants. When you're applying for grants, there are always names of the grant agents that you can contact. If you have any questions, make sure you contact them. And not just for information, but you can also contact them for resources, and then keep on building that relationship so that, for example, if you don't get the grant the first time, you can keep on pitching other projects. After a while, that grant agent will recognize your name and say, such and such a person, I remember him or her. This is the third or fourth time that they've applied, right? I remember that they're always very gracious and professional, and I can see that their work is getting better and better. So do everything you can to make sure that you stay in their minds, right? Also, another way to initiate contact is through Facebook. You can join different communities or join groups on Facebook, and you can message other artists or other members of that community. That's particularly applicable now that we're living this strange period of COVID. You can use LinkedIn, for example. I use LinkedIn for my kind of like a professional CV, but I can't say that I use it very often to kind of initiate contact. But on a few rare occasions, I have invited people to connect, and I have messaged them in order to get things moving. So LinkedIn is another way, but I would say the best way is really in person or even by the phone. And also make sure that you have a website that contacts can easily consult, so that when they ask you, so what's your work like? You can send them the link right away. Also, here's another thing for emails. It's important to always include a signature at the end of your correspondence, so that people know how to get a hold of you, but also so they know what you do. I have two careers, one in the arts and one outside the arts. And it's the one outside the arts that until now has made it possible for me to make a good living. So I wear so many different hats that sometimes people can very easily get confused. So in order to eliminate the confusion, I make sure that when I'm working in the arts, I use one signature. And when I'm working outside the arts, I use another. But either way, sometimes they intertwine. But I always make sure that when I send something to someone, that they get the right signature, right? And that within the signature, you've got your title or your position or your trade as an artist, your website address, email, telephone, as well as website. Let's see. Yes, there were opportunities. So we've a little bit covered this before, but you can approach, meet, and solicit people at art galleries and museums, artist one centers, arts and cultural organizations, educational institutions. You can meet collectors through these kinds of through these venues, curators. You can meet other artists. You can meet the general public, and also granting agencies. Granting agencies will sometimes send their personnel out to visit exhibitions. So it's make sure that when you go out, that you go out and meet people. Another great way to network is to get involved in your community. Join a board of directors of an organization that you admire and respect. For me, I've joined the English Language Arts Network, and I've been a member of, I've been active at Festival Akshazi for close to 10 years. So this is a great way to get involved in the community. You get to meet and kind of grow with other people who've got shared values and common interests. You can also volunteer for arts and cultural organizations as well as festivals, and you can support other artists by giving them a hand. with Artch, I mean, you've got a good group of artists and a good support network. And so moving forward from Artch, when you're having exhibitions, you can always extend request to your fellow artists, or they can seek your help in, for example, putting together a show. Or, for example, it could be sometimes transporting, or what do you think of my marketing material? So it's really important to do that, and also when you can, try to support other artists by buying their work, as in the case of Silva Ewins. Like, buy people's work, support them, point artists. Like, for example, if a collector's, not particularly, how to put it, if you meet collectors, you can always point them out to other artists whose work they may appreciate, and that certainly helps. Here's another thing for networking here in Montreal. We're very fortunate that it's a bilingual city, so there is the French, the challenge of networking in French and English. I myself, I'm more Anglophone than Francophone. My daughter is more Francophone than Anglophone, and I've worked in both English and in French. My French is functional. It's good for all my professional activities, but I'm not a particularly great writer. So it has been the struggle for me to kind of get out there and connect and network. In my earlier years in Montreal, I kind of complained, like a lot of people complained about being kind of stuck in the Anglophone bubble. And at a certain point, I said, what's the point of complaining? If I want to really prosper here professionally and personally, I'm going to have to make a greater attempt to get out there. And so that meant, in my particular case, kind of embracing being in an uncomfortable situations, being in like going to events where I didn't know anybody, where I was often the only Anglophone and the only visible minority in the crowd. So it was a struggle. But I just made sure at a certain point, like if I want to integrate in the arts and culture milieu, I've got to truly integrate, meaning I've just got to put myself out there, and I can't really wait until someone does it for me. And so through that, I was able to establish kind of and make my working relationship in the Francophone area grow. And so much so that now I would say that I'm equally as comfortable in French and in English professionally. I know it is, for many of you, a challenge, but it is a really important challenge to overcome if you really want to make the most out of your experience as an artist living here in Montreal. Next, manage your contacts and time. These are just practical things. Sync your cellular phone and computer, your calendar, your iCalendar, your contacts. Particularly helpful in organizing your time is to use a physical or digital calendar. Plan to commit and realize your networking objectives, meaning, if there's a certain area that you want to move towards in terms of your career, kind of try to map it out of where you want to go, and then all of the different stages you can use to get there, and always move things forward.